He stopped his truck because of the rain. He stayed because of what he saw in her arms. A soldier soaked to the bone, clutching a newborn walking through the storm like she had nowhere left to go. What happened next would change all three of their lives forever. Before we begin, if you believe in the quiet power of kindness, healing, and second chances, take a moment to subscribe. These stories are made for hearts like yours. Now let me tell you what happened. The day a silent man opened his door and found a family waiting. The rain had been falling for hours, thick, relentless sheets that blurred the windshield and carved silver rivers down the gravel road. Cole Barrett's fingers tightened around the steering wheel of his old Ford pickup, the wipers fighting a losing battle against the storm. Outside, pine trees bent in the wind like they were whispering secrets to each other. Inside, there was silence. Always. Silence. He didn't need music, didn't need the radio. He hadn't heard the sound of his own voice in nearly 6 years. His days were structured, quiet, and full of purpose. Fixing engines, caring for Daisy, cooking dinners no one ever complimented out loud, but always ate to the last bite. It was a life built on rhythm, small routines, and an aching space where words used to live. Tonight, though, something felt off, uneasy, like a whisper trying to claw its way into a world that had long since gone quiet. As Cole rounded a bend, headlights cut through the mist, and that's when he saw her. At first it didn't register, just a flash of dark green and movement on the shoulder. But as his truck rolled closer, the figure emerged from the shadows like something torn from a war film, a woman in a soaked olive-drab uniform, hair matted to her face, cradling a bundle against her chest like her life depended on it. Cole hit the brakes. His truck groaned in protest as it came to a stop on the shoulder tires, kicking up wet gravel. The woman flinched, stepping back defensively, one arm tightening protectively around the infant in her arms. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Mud streaked her boots, and her eyes, sharp blue, met his, with the kind of weariness only soldiers and survivors shared. Cole slowly reached over and unlocked the passenger side door, pushing it open with a creak. No words. No pressure. Just an offer. The woman hesitated. The baby let out a weak, muffled cry. She stepped forward. Rain poured over them both as she climbed in, careful not to jostle the infant. Her uniform clung to her like a second skin, heavy with water and exhaustion. She shut the door with a trembling hand and turned to him. "Thank you," she said, voice low, rough from exposure. "I'm Harper." Cole nodded once. His throat twitched as if wanting to reply, but the sound never came. Instead, he offered a soft half-smile and shifted the truck into gear. The road stretched ahead, a ribbon of wet darkness. Inside the cab, Harper adjusted the baby in her arms, revealing a tiny pink face nestled in a worn Army-issue blanket. The child couldn't be more than a week old. Cole glanced over and felt his chest tighten, not out of pity, not even out of curiosity, but something quieter, older, familiar. "She's hungry," Harper muttered almost to herself, "and cold. But she's a fighter, just like her mama." Cole kept one hand on the wheel, reaching with the other into the glove compartment. He pulled out a small flannel towel, soft, clean, folded neatly, and handed it to her. Harper looked at the offering like it was gold. She took it carefully, then looked back at him, brow furrowed. "You don't talk," Cole shook his head once. "Accident?" she asked. Another nod. Simple. Direct. He could feel her studying him as the truck rumbled along the washed-out road. Most people did. But unlike others, Harper didn't ask more. She didn't fill the silence with words meant to cover discomfort. She just held her baby and looked straight ahead, as if she understood that sometimes silence wasn't empty, but sacred. The next 10 minutes passed without a word. When the headlights finally illuminated the edge of Cole's property, A weathered wooden fence, a tin mailbox, half swallowed by weeds. Harper stirred beside him. "This your place?" He nodded and turned into the long gravel driveway. The cabin came into view, warm light glowing faintly behind fogged windows. The front porch light flickered the way it always did during storms. Harper hesitated again as he parked. "Are you sure it's okay I can sleep in the truck if that's easier? I needed to get off the road." Cole raised his brows, mildly offended, and opened his door. He disappeared inside for a moment, and returned with a thick wool blanket, a thermos of something steaming, and a tiny knit cap, Daisy's old baby hat from years ago. Without a word, he handed them all to her. Harper swallowed hard. Her eyes filled though the tears didn't fall. "You really don't talk, huh?" she whispered. "But you hear everything." He smiled again, wider this time, and gestured toward the front door. She followed him in. The storm raged on outside, pounding the tin roof like 1,000 small hammers. Inside Cole's cabin was dimly lit, rustic, but warm-smelling faintly of cedarwood black coffee, and something baking long ago. The floor creaked beneath their feet, and a small fire crackled in the stone hearth, throwing dancing shadows across the wooden walls. Harper stepped inside cautiously, her boots leaving muddy prints on the entry mat. She clutched her baby tighter, as if afraid the warmth might slip through her fingers. Her eyes darted around the space, simple, functional, but unmistakably lived in. A denim jacket hung on a hook by the door. A pair of tiny rain boots rested beside a worn welcome mat embroidered with the word home. "You live here alone?" she asked softly, unsure if he'd answer. Cole nodded, then pointed toward a picture frame on the mantel. It showed a smiling little girl about 8, with unruly curls and a gap-toothed grin, hugging a shaggy golden retriever. "She's beautiful," Harper said. "Your daughter." He nodded again, a flicker of pride in his eyes. As if summoned by her name, footsteps pitter-pattered down the hallway. A small voice called out Daddy. A moment later, Daisy appeared barefoot, wrapped in a purple blanket, her eyes wide with sleepy curiosity. When she saw Harper and the baby, she paused, blinking. Cole crouched and opened his arms. Daisy ran to him, burying her face in his chest. "I heard thunder," she whispered. Then, after a beat, "Who's that?" Harper straightened, unsure what to say. Cole signed something quickly with one hand. She needed help. Daisy translated, then turned to Harper with a smile. "Is that your baby?" Harper nodded slowly. "Her name's Gracie." Daisy's eyes lit up. "Can I hold her?" Cole raised a brow. Harper hesitated, then carefully knelt down and placed Gracie, still wrapped tightly in the flannel blanket, into Daisy's eager arms. The little girl held her like a seasoned big sister, gentle, secure. "She's so tiny," Daisy murmured. Harper exhaled for what felt like the first time all evening. "Okay," she said, her voice cracking. "Now I really feel like I'm intruding." Cole stood, walked to the kitchen, and returned with 2 mugs, one filled with tea, the other with warm milk for Daisy. He handed the tea to Harper, then gestured toward the armchair by the fire. She sat down reluctantly, Gracie now resting in her arms again. Her eyes flicked to Cole as he handed Daisy the baby hat from earlier. Daisy slipped it onto Gracie's head, with the care of someone who'd done it before. Harper sipped the tea. Chamomile. Slightly sweet. "You didn't have to go to all this trouble," she said, then winced. "Sorry. I keep talking like you're going to answer." Cole gave her a patient look, then walked to a drawer and pulled out a small spiral notebook and a pen. He flipped it open and scribbled something. "It's no trouble. You needed help. That's enough." Harper stared at the words. They were written in a steady, neat hand. Something about it, the clarity, the directness, moved her more than she expected. She ran her finger lightly over the ink. Most people would have driven right past. Cole shrugged, then wrote again. I've been passed by, too. Harper looked at him, stunned into silence. For a moment, neither of them moved. The storm outside softened into steady rain like the sky had finally exhaled. Daisy curled up on the couch with a blanket over her lap, watching the fire, as if she were guarding the room with her quiet presence. Harper leaned back in the chair, rocking gently. Gracie stirred in her arms, but didn't wake. I was discharged 3 weeks ago, Harper whispered. Honorable. I served 8 years. Logistics mostly supplies coordination, long hours, not a lot of glory. I thought I'd come home to something solid. She paused, but the man I came home to said he didn't want to raise a baby. Said he didn't sign up for that. I didn't have the energy to fight him. Cole didn't interrupt. He just listened. Really listened the way most people forgot how to do. I stayed with a friend for a bit, but she has 2 kids of her own. It wasn't fair. I've been trying to find somewhere safe. Somewhere that doesn't make me feel like a burden. She looked over at him. And then you showed up. Cole reached for the notebook again. You're not a burden. You're someone who did her part. Let someone else take the next shift. Harper laughed unexpectedly. It was a dry, weary laugh, but real. Next shift, huh? She wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her uniform. I haven't laughed in weeks. Cole offered her the faintest, most honest smile she'd seen in a long time. Outside, the rain began to slow, tapping gently against the windows, like a lullaby. Inside, the fire dimmed but kept burning, and in that room full of silence, a sense of understanding settled, like warm light between them. Harper looked down at her daughter, then at the man who said nothing but somehow spoke to the broken pieces inside her. Thank you, she whispered again. But this time she didn't mean just for the tea. Morning light filtered through the cabin's windows in ribbons of soft gold, touching everything with the tenderness of a fresh start. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind a sky the color of washed denim and the quiet, dripping hush of the forest at rest. Harper woke to the gentle crackle of eggs in a cast-iron skillet and the faint scent of brewed coffee curling through the air. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. Her fingers tightened protectively around Gracie, still sleeping in the crook of her arm. Then she remembered the truck, the rain, the man who didn't speak, but said more than most people ever did. Cole. The name felt solid in her chest, comforting. She sat up slowly on the worn sofa where she'd spent the night, the old quilt slipping from her shoulders. The baby stirred, whimpering softly before settling again. Across the room, Daisy stood at the kitchen counter, hair in a lopsided braid, wearing pajamas covered in cartoon dogs, scrambling eggs with practiced ease. Harper blinked. Are you cooking? Daisy turned and grinned. Dad usually makes breakfast, but I help on weekends. He's outside checking the generator. Harper tried to sit up straighter. I can help. Nope. Daisy interrupted, matter of fact. Rule number 1. Guests don't cook on their first day. You can help tomorrow. Harper couldn't help it. She smiled. A real smile. The kind that reached her tired eyes. She eased herself off the couch, shifting Gracie gently into a nearby bassinet she hadn't noticed the night before. It was simple but well kept, painted a soft sage green. A tiny stuffed lamb rested inside its fur, worn from years of love. That used to be mine, Daisy said proudly. Dad fixed it up after I outgrew it. Harper paused. He kept it all these years. Daisy nodded. He keeps everything that matters. Just then the door creaked open, and Cole stepped in. Boots, muddy hair damp with morning dew. He carried a folded tarp and a toolkit in one arm, a clipboard in the other. He nodded toward Harper, then toward the coffee pot as if asking, want some? She nodded, grateful. He poured her a cup and handed it over the heat radiating through her fingers, like a promise you're safe here. Harper sipped and exhaled. This place is peaceful. Cole raised a brow, waiting. I didn't realize how much I needed peace until now. He scribbled on his notepad. Most of us don't until we're drowning. She read the words slowly, then met his gaze. Were you drowning? He didn't answer, at least not in words. But something in the way he looked at her, then at Daisy, then at the bassinet, told her everything. They sat at the small wooden table, the three of them. Daisy served eggs and toast with the seriousness of a maitre d'. Harper felt something unfamiliar creeping in as she watched them, a sense of belonging as fragile as breath. So Daisy said between bites, "Are you staying?" Harper blinked. I don't know yet." "Well," Daisy said, "chewing you should. Gracie likes it here." Harper chuckled. She hasn't said much. Daisy leaned in. Babies don't need to talk. They just feel things. She stopped crying last night, didn't she? Harper's smile faltered. She remembered that moment, Gracie going quiet in Cole's arms, her tiny hand gripping his flannel shirt like she already knew him. Cole watched her carefully now, his expression unreadable. "I'm not looking for charity," Harper said softly. "I can work, clean, fix things." Cole stood and picked up his notepad. "This isn't charity. It's kindness. There's a difference." Harper stared at the words, then at the man behind them. He'd said less than 50 words since she met him, but somehow she felt more heard than she had in years. She cleared her throat. "The road, do you know how long until it's passable?" Cole glanced toward the window, then wrote, "Landslide took out the trail. County will send a crew, but not before next week." A week. Harper swallowed hard. She didn't want to admit it, but part of her was relieved. The idea of leaving had clawed at her chest all night. Now, with the excuse of being snowed in, no rained in, she could breathe again. Just for a little while. She nodded. "Okay, then. I guess we're here." Daisy clapped her hands. "We're gonna need more diapers." They all laughed softly, naturally. And just like that, something shifted. The cabin wasn't just a shelter anymore. It was a pause, a space between endings and beginnings, a place where things might not be perfect, but they could be possible. Harper reached over and took Cole's notepad. For the first time, she scribbled something herself. "You didn't just save us from the storm. You gave us a place to land." He looked down at her words, then back up with eyes that shimmered just slightly. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, casting warm light on the cabin's front porch. Inside, 3 hearts beat a little more slowly, a little more calmly, as if for the first time in a long while, they'd found the rhythm of something that felt a lot like home. The morning after the storm, the air smelled of damp earth and pine needles. Water still dripped from the roof in slow, steady drops, and the distant creek roared louder than usual with the runoff. The silence between the trees was no longer ominous. It was peaceful, like a long breath after too much noise. Harper stood on the porch, arms folded tightly around her, as she watched Cole down by the road. He was inspecting the damage his boots, sinking into the soft mud, with every step, his posture patient and methodical. The gravel driveway beyond the fence had been partially washed out, and the narrow trail that led toward the main road was buried beneath fallen branches and a mini landslide of wet clay. She took a sip of the coffee he'd brewed, black and bold. Too strong, but it helped her feel something. Inside, Daisy giggled as she played peekaboo with Gracie, who responded with gurgling coos. That sound, innocent alive, made Harper's chest tighten with both joy and ache. She hadn't heard Gracie this content since, well, ever. She turned her attention back to Cole. He moved like a man who knew how to be alone. Not bitterly, just practically. Efficient. Deliberate. Someone who had learned long ago that silence could be an ally, not an enemy. When he finally returned to the porch, Harper raised her eyebrows. How bad Cole wiped his hands on a cloth, pulled out his notebook, and wrote, "Trails blocked. No vehicles. Main road might take a week or more. You're stuck with us." She smiled faintly. "Could be worse." Then she added after a breath, "But I don't want to be a burden." Cole looked at her for a long moment. He didn't write anything, just stared, his gaze steady, like he was trying to decide whether to speak with words or something else entirely. Then he turned and walked into the cabin, motioning for her to follow. Harper stepped inside, setting her mug on the counter. He pointed toward the hallway. She followed him to a small room at the end, simple but clean. A twin bed, a wooden rocking chair, a dresser with only one drawer in use. A framed sketch of a pine tree in pencil hung above the bed. Cole tapped the dresser, then gestured toward her. This room. It was hers now. Her throat tightened. "You didn't have to do this." He scribbled, "I wanted to." She reached for the notepad, paused, then shook her head. "I'm not used to people like you." He didn't respond, but there was a flicker in his eyes, a glint of shared truth. Neither of them was used to people like each other. Later that afternoon, Harper helped Cole chop kindling behind the cabin. She insisted. Cole watched as she gripped the axe with uncertain hands and swung, missing the center of the log completely. She laughed. "I guess logistics didn't cover lumberjacking." He raised an eyebrow and offered to show her. Slowly, he guided her hands into the correct grip, adjusted her stance, still without speaking, just simple, gentle corrections. His presence was steadying, grounding. She hadn't realized how much she missed being touched without fear, without expectation. Eventually, she landed a clean split, and both of them smiled. That evening, while Daisy and Harper prepared dinner, macaroni and cheese with slices of tomato on top, Cole sat outside whittling a block of cedar. His fingers moved with quiet purpose. The scent drifted inside. Daisy set the table and asked suddenly, "Do you think Daddy ever gets lonely?" Harper looked up, surprised. "I mean, he doesn't talk, but he listens a lot," Daisy continued. "Sometimes I wonder if he listens so hard because he misses hearing things." Harper felt something twist inside her. "You're a smart girl, Daisy." "I get it from Mama," the child said with a soft smile. "But Daddy, he holds on tight to things, even when they're gone." Later that night, after Gracie had finally drifted off and Daisy was curled beneath her quilt, Harper stepped onto the porch. Cole was still there, rocking gently in the old cedar chair. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and sat beside him. The stars had returned, clear, sharp pinpricks in a black sky. The moon cast a glow over the trees like frost. "Today was a good day," she said. Cole nodded. Harper hesitated, then said more quietly, "It's been a long time since I felt wanted." He turned toward her, listening. "I don't mean romantically. I just mean seen. Not judged, not handled. Just accepted." She didn't look at him, but she felt his attention like warmth. Then came the slow scratch of pen on paper. "You belong. That's all that matters." Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them away. "I wish I could believe that." He paused. Then he wrote again. "When someone's drowning, they don't need to believe in the rope. They just need to hold on." She looked at him, her mouth parting slightly. It was such a simple truth, but no one had ever said it like that. They sat in silence, until Harper spoke again, her voice lower now. "My ex is still out there. I never filed for custody. I was too scared, too tired. If he finds us, I don't know what he'll do." She hadn't meant to say it, not that way. But the words tumbled out like bricks from a wall that had cracked too long ago. Cole didn't flinch, didn't stiffen. He simply set the notepad aside. And then, for the first time, he reached over and gently placed his hand over hers. No words, just that quiet contact firm, warm anchoring. And in that moment, Harper didn't feel afraid. Rain came again the next morning, not the hard, punishing kind, but soft and steady, the kind that whispered against the windows like a lullaby. The fire crackled quietly in the hearth, and Daisy lay on the rug, sketching something with colored pencils, while Harper sat nearby, rocking Gracie to sleep. Cole was in the back room, the one with the door always closed. Harper had noticed it from the first day. While every other part of the cabin felt lived in, warm, and welcoming, that room remained untouched. Like a chapter sealed off in a book no one was allowed to reopen. But today the door stood slightly ajar. She didn't mean to intrude. She just meant to check on him. But something instinct curiosity, something deeper pulled her toward it. The room smelled of old paper and pine. Sunlight filtered through dusty blinds falling on a desk, cluttered with yellowed notebooks, tools, an oil lamp, and a single photograph in a wooden frame. It was her Cole's late wife. She was beautiful. Warm smile, eyes like daisies. In the photo, she wore an oversized flannel shirt, holding a baby Daisy, likely just months old. Cole stood behind them, his arms wrapped around them both. His expression relaxed in a way Harper hadn't yet seen in real life. On the desk beside the frame lay a small leather-bound journal, its spine worn from years of touch. Harper's fingers hovered over it hesitant. Then she gently opened it. It wasn't a diary, not in the traditional sense. Each entry was written to someone, M. It began each time. The handwriting was neat, careful, but the tone was raw. M. Today, Daisy took her first step. She looked right at your photo before doing it. I think she needed your smile to make her brave. I did too. I tried to fix the leak under the sink, flooded the kitchen instead. You would have laughed, that belly-deep laugh of yours, and told me I needed supervision. God, I miss that laugh. She asked if you're coming back. I told her you're watching from the stars. I hope that's true. I hope you're proud of how hard I'm trying. Page after page. Letters he never sent. Words he couldn't say aloud. A man with no voice, but so much to say. Harper closed the book gently, reverently. Her throat burned. When she turned, Cole was standing in the doorway. He didn't look angry. Just still. Harper opened her mouth, but no words came. Finally, she said softly, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Cole stepped forward and held up a hand. Then he walked past her, picked up the journal, and held it for a moment, his thumb brushing the edge, before setting it back down on the desk. He pulled a page from the notebook in his back pocket and wrote, You weren't intruding. I left the door open. Harper felt her shoulders relax. She hadn't even realized how tense she'd been. I didn't know you wrote. He tilted his head. Like that, she added. To her. He nodded once. Then slowly he picked up a small wooden box from the shelf and opened it. Inside were dozens of folded notes, all addressed the same way M. Harper stared at them. I think she said quietly, You've said more than most men say in a lifetime. Cole gave her a soft, sad smile. They stood in silence for a long moment, surrounded by the weight of memories and the quiet reverence of grief that hadn't been shoved away, only shaped into something tender. Harper finally whispered, I lost someone too. A sister. Afghanistan. Cole turned his full attention to her. She was 3 years older. Fierce. Funny. We joined together. She didn't make it back. I did. I came home with medals, but also with pieces missing. Cole didn't write anything. He just placed a hand over his chest and nodded once slowly, deeply. Harper continued. That's the thing no one tells you about surviving. You don't always feel lucky. You just feel guilty. A tear slipped down her cheek. She didn't brush it away. Cole reached for a scrap of paper and wrote, Guilt is love without a place to go. Harper let out a shaky breath. God, that's exactly it. Outside, the rain softened further, barely more than mist now. Inside, the two of them stood not as broken people, but as people slowly learning how to carry the weight of what they'd lost together. That night, Harper returned to her room and sat by the window, Gracie asleep in the bassinet beside her. She thought about those letters, the quiet strength it took to write them, the way grief, when tended gently, didn't have to poison everything it could become part of the soil something new might grow from. She picked up a blank page, and for the first time in months, she wrote something that wasn't about logistic supply runs or survival. She wrote to her sister. It started with a hum. Barely audible at first, like something Harper wasn't sure she'd imagined. It wasn't loud or intentional, just a faint vibration in the air as the fire crackled low and the world outside sank into night. She was sitting on the edge of the couch, rocking Gracie, slowly patting her back in gentle rhythm. The baby had been fussier than usual, squirming and whining in that half-conscious way newborns do when they're fighting sleep. Harper didn't notice she was humming until Daisy looked up from her sketchpad and whispered, "That's pretty." "What is it?" Harper blinked. I don't know," she said softly. "It's just something my sister used to sing. A lullaby she made up when we were kids." She trailed off. Gracie calmed beneath her hand, letting out a long sigh. Across the room, Cole sat in his usual armchair, one leg crossed over the other, flipping through a maintenance manual with half his attention. But something about the way he turned the page slower than usual made Harper glance at him. He was listening. Harper smiled faintly and continued humming. The tune was simple, repetitive, but there was something soothing about it, something old, familiar even though it had no name. A few moments later, Cole stood up and disappeared down the hallway. Harper didn't think much of it until he returned with a long black case in hand. She froze. He opened it slowly with the reverence of a priest handling a relic. Inside lay an acoustic guitar, aged, but cared for, its strings glinting in the firelight. The finish was worn smooth, where fingers had once moved over it countless times. Daisy's eyes widened. "You still play?" Cole didn't answer. He simply lifted the guitar into his lap, adjusted the strap, and tuned it slowly, methodically. His fingers moved with a precision Harper hadn't seen in anyone but combat medics and old musicians. Then, without fanfare, he began to play. It was the same melody Harper had been humming. Not an exact copy, but close enough that she stopped breathing. Her eyes welled. "How did you—" He didn't look up, just kept playing, his touch feather light as if coaxing the memory from the strings. The room went still. The fire crackled. Daisy sat on the floor, wide-eyed, hugging a pillow to her chest. Even Gracie seemed to listen, her tiny fists curling against Harper's shirt as the melody wrapped around them all. And Harper, she felt something break, not in a painful way, in the way an old lock breaks open when someone finally finds the key. She remembered that song, the nights in a dusty bunk when her sister sang it after long missions. The nights she sang it alone in hospital tents to injured soldiers and frightened children. It had been her way of holding on, of surviving. She had forgotten how much she missed it until now. When Cole finished, he let the final chord fade into silence, his fingers resting lightly on the strings. The quiet that followed wasn't empty. It was sacred. Harper wiped her cheek and laughed softly. "You're full of surprises." Cole gave her a sideways glance and wrote on the pad beside him. Music never needed a voice, just a soul. She nodded, throat tight. "You've got both." He tapped the guitar once and wrote again. "I used to play for her, my wife, every Sunday night." Harper glanced toward the photograph still resting on the mantel. She must have loved it. Cole hesitated, then wrote, She said it was the only way she ever knew what I was feeling. Harper looked at him, her heart squeezing. She must have felt very loved. Cole didn't answer. He didn't need to. That night, after Daisy had gone to bed, and the cabin had settled into the quiet hum of fire and breath, Harper found herself sitting on the porch steps, with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, Gracie asleep against her chest. Cole joined her after a while, carrying the guitar. He didn't play, just held it in his lap, fingers idly brushing the edge, as if waiting for permission from the night. Harper stared up at the stars. I didn't think I'd ever feel safe again. Cole looked at her waiting. I've been running so long I forgot what it felt like to stop. She looked down at Gracie, then back at him. And now, I'm scared to want this. He nodded slowly, then wrote, "Wanting isn't weakness. It's proof you're still alive." She laughed a little breathlessly. "How are you not a therapist?" He grinned, crooked and fleeting, but warm. Then he added, "I'm just a man who lost everything once." So now I notice the small things. Harper leaned back, pulling the blanket tighter. "What do you notice now?" Cole paused, then strummed a single chord. He wrote, "You, holding on, even when you don't know how." Harper didn't reply. She couldn't, but she didn't need to. She just reached out, rested her hand gently over his, and sat there in the hush of midnight, letting the warmth of the music and the man beside her remind her that sometimes broken lullabies could still bring peace. Even if they had no words, the sky was unusually still that afternoon. Not stormy, not clear, just heavy, as if the clouds were holding their breath. Cole noticed it first. He always did. The air felt different, denser the way it sometimes did before something broke. Inside the cabin, Harper was folding laundry with Daisy, while Gracie slept in the bassinet, one tiny hand twitching in a dream. Music played softly from an old radio on the shelf, one of Cole's favorite blues stations. Harper had just finished folding a baby blanket when headlights swept across the front windows. They weren't Cole's. She froze. Daisy noticed too. "That's not Daddy," she said, standing up. Harper's breath caught. She walked quickly to the window and peeked through the curtain. A sleek black truck idled in the driveway. Clean. Loud. Familiar. Her stomach dropped. He found her. Cole emerged from the barn just as the driver stepped out. Chase. Harper's ex. He looked exactly as she remembered, tall, broad-shouldered, with that confident swagger that once seemed charming and now felt like a threat. His eyes scanned the cabin, then locked onto Cole, who stood still, expression unreadable. Harper burst out the front door, her heart pounding. "Chase," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. He smirked. "Well, look at you, playing house already." Cole moved closer, stopping at Harper's side. Chase sized him up with an amused glance. "What's this new boyfriend? He looks like a mute lumberjack." Harper stepped in front of Cole. "What do you want?" "I want my daughter." Chase said flatly. "She's mine. You left with her. No papers, no permission." "That's kidnapping, sweetheart. You said you didn't want her. That was before I realized you'd take her and hide like some damn criminal." Cole's hand brushed Harper's elbow, a silent gesture that grounded her. Then he stepped forward, putting himself fully between her and Chase. Chase rolled his eyes. "Move, mountain man. This doesn't concern you." Cole didn't flinch. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small notepad. He wrote, "You're not taking anyone." Chase laughed. "Oh, he writes now." "Cute." Harper stood taller. "Chase, listen to me." "No," he snapped. "I've got every right. And unless you want me calling the sheriff, you'd better hand her over." Cole stepped forward, slow and deliberate. His eyes were calm, but his presence had changed no longer. The quiet caretaker, but something older, stronger. like steel forged in fire. Chase hesitated, just for a second. Cole reached into his other pocket, pulled out his phone, and tapped the screen. He turned it toward Chase. A voice recording played Harper's voicemail to her lawyer, dated 2 weeks prior, stating clearly that she had fled due to emotional abuse, fear, and the need to protect her child. Harper's jaw dropped. She'd left that message on a payphone, unsure if it would go anywhere. Cole had retrieved it and saved it. Chase's smirk faltered. "That's fake." Cole shook his head and wrote, "I don't bluff." Then he stepped even closer, close enough that Chase had to either hold his ground or back down. He backed down. "This isn't over," Chase muttered, turning on his heel. He slammed the truck door and peeled out of the driveway, gravel spraying. Harper stood frozen, heart racing until the sound of the engine disappeared into the trees. Daisy peeked through the front door. "Is everything okay?" Harper forced a smile. "Yeah, baby. Just a visitor who's leaving." Cole gently touched her shoulder. She turned to face him, and her composure shattered. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered, "I didn't know he'd find us. I thought we were safe." Cole led her inside. He didn't try to fix it, didn't try to reassure her with words he couldn't speak. He just made tea, pulled the blanket over her shoulders, and sat across from her at the kitchen table. Only after her breathing steadied did he slide his notepad toward her. "You are safe, because I'm here, and I'm not leaving." She stared at the words, not poetic, not dramatic, but solid, sure, like a wall she could lean against. She reached across the table, her hand trembling, and rested it atop his. "Thank you," she whispered. "You didn't just protect me today. You showed me what it looks like when a man stands with you instead of over you." He nodded once. That night, after Daisy had gone to sleep and the cabin lay in hushed darkness, Harper stood outside beneath a sky full of stars. Cole joined her. They didn't speak. She didn't need to ask how he'd found the recording, or why he'd kept it. She just leaned against him, letting the silence wrap around them both like a second skin. Because for the first time in a very long time, Harper wasn't running, and Cole wasn't just shelter. He was home. The night after Chase left, the world seemed to exhale. The rain had stopped. The wind had settled. Even the forest outside the cabin, usually alive with rustling branches and nocturnal chirps, had fallen still, like it too had held its breath during the confrontation. Harper couldn't sleep. She lay awake in the quiet bedroom Cole had given her, Gracie curled beside her in the bassinet, breathing in soft, steady rhythms. But inside Harper's chest, her own breath was uneven. Her heart wasn't racing from fear anymore, but from something harder to name. It wasn't about Chase now. It was about Cole, his presence, his unwavering strength. The way he had stepped in front of danger, not like a hero from a movie, but like a man who knew what it meant to lose and wouldn't let anyone else suffer if he could help it. That kind of goodness was rare and terrifying, because it made her want to stay. Harper sat up and reached for the notebook Cole had left on the nightstand weeks ago, the same one he used to communicate. This time, she opened to a blank page and began writing not to him but for herself. But the words inevitably became a letter. "Cole, I don't know if I'll ever be brave enough to say these things out loud, so I'm writing them instead, because that's how you taught me to speak without a voice. When I arrived here, I was looking for somewhere to hide. I didn't want to be saved. I didn't believe I was worth saving. But you didn't rescue me. You stood beside me. That matters more than you'll ever know. You gave Gracie her first quiet sleep. You gave Daisy a reason to laugh every day. And you gave me peace, a kind I hadn't felt in years. I see how you care for everything. The porch steps, the teapot, the guitar you thought you'd never play again. And I see how gently you care for us. I came here as a burden, But somehow you made me feel like a person again. A mother. A woman. I'm scared of wanting more. But every time I look at you, I feel less afraid. Thank you for listening with your whole soul. Harper. She folded the page carefully, her hands trembling just slightly. Then she placed it under Cole's coffee mug on the kitchen table and went back to bed. When morning came, the cabin smelled of cinnamon and wood smoke. Harper stepped into the kitchen, heart pounding. Cole stood at the stove flipping pancakes. Daisy sat on the counter swinging her legs and holding a bowl of blueberries. Everything looked normal, except for the folded paper in Cole's hand. He had already read it. He didn't say anything, of course. But when Harper stepped closer, Cole turned and for a moment he just looked at her. Not with surprise, not with judgment, but with something deeper. Recognition. Then he took a pen from behind his ear and scribbled a few words on a scrap of paper. He handed it to her without ceremony. She read it. I've been writing letters too, for years. But I never knew who would answer. She met his eyes, and in that second, something between them shifted. No longer strangers, not yet lovers, but something real. Daisy broke the moment by clapping her hands. Can we have pancakes every Saturday? Even when Miss Harper gets her own place. Harper laughed a little too quickly. We'll see, kiddo. Cole just looked at her. Steady. Certain. No pressure. But no doubt either. Later that afternoon, while Daisy napped and Gracie dozed in a sunbeam on a blanket, Harper sat on the front porch with Cole beside her. They didn't talk. They didn't need to. Instead, Cole pulled out his guitar and began to play the same gentle lullaby she had hummed just nights before. This time, Harper sang. Her voice was soft, tentative at first, but steady, clear. He watched her as she sang no words on paper this time, just music in the air, the two of them sharing something deeper than conversation. And when she finished, Cole reached for her hand, not dramatically, not possessively, just present. And Harper didn't pull away. She laced her fingers through his. Inside the house, Gracie stirred. Life would call them back soon. Diapers, dishes, decisions. But for now, they were just two people. Two souls. And one letter that had finally found its answer. The road had finally cleared. A county crew had come through the day before, their bulldozers growling up the trail at sunrise. It was almost funny how normal it was to watch strangers in orange vests clear mud and branches, oblivious to the fact that their arrival felt like the ending of a chapter. For Harper, it meant the path out had returned, and with it, the choice. She hadn't slept much. The past week had changed her. Not just the quiet or the safety, or even Cole's steady presence, but something deeper, something scarier. She had started to hope again, but she knew too well what happened when she held on too tight to hope. People left. Promises broke. The good turned fragile and slipped through her fingers. So Harper did what she had always done when she felt the pull of something too good. She packed. The backpack was small, just essentials. A few baby clothes, diapers, the same swaddle she'd wrapped Gracie in that first stormy night. She folded it carefully, as if the way she packed could somehow soften the decision. She left the letter on the kitchen table. This time, it wasn't love or gratitude. It was apology. Cole, I need to go. Not because I don't care, but because I care too much and I'm afraid. I've lived my life expecting things to fall apart. That's how I survive. You and Daisy. You made me believe in things I wasn't ready to believe again. I don't know what I'll do next, but I do know I'll never forget this place. Or you, Harper. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, Gracie nestled against her chest. The cabin behind her was still. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting pale gold light across the floorboards. She almost turned back. Almost. Then she stepped outside, letting the screen door shut behind her with the softest click. She walked down the porch steps, boots crunching against the gravel heart, pounding in time with every step away from everything she had started to love. But before she could reach the gate, a small voice called out, "Miss Harper." Harper froze. She turned. Daisy stood on the porch in pajamas, her hair a mess of curls, eyes still puffy from sleep. Harper forced a smile. "Hey, sweetheart, go back inside. It's early." But Daisy didn't move. Instead, she looked at her with eyes that held something far older than her years. "You're leaving," Harper swallowed. "Just for a bit. I need to figure things out." Daisy shook her head. "You already did." "Daisy, my daddy doesn't talk," she said, stepping down a stair. "But I know what he feels." Harper's throat tightened. "I know he cares. That's why I have to go. It's too much." Daisy walked closer. "No, it's not too much. It's just right," she said simply. Then she reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "He wrote this last night. Told me not to give it to you unless you looked like you were gonna run." Harper took the note with trembling fingers. She unfolded it. "Don't go. I don't need perfect. I just need you. Broken, scared, trying. You've already given me more than you know." Harper pressed the note to her chest. Tears blurred her vision. Daisy stepped forward again. "I think he's scared too. He just never had someone to come back." Harper looked toward the cabin. Cole was standing inside, just behind the screen door. He didn't move, didn't rush out or shout. He simply waited, his eyes meeting hers across the morning light. Harper didn't speak either. She just turned back, walked up the steps slowly, and placed Gracie into his arms. Then she leaned her forehead against his chest and finally whispered, "Okay." He wrapped one arm around her, the other cradled Gracie, and the silence between them was no longer empty. It was full. Full of the words they couldn't say. Full of the life they were starting to build quietly, one day at a time. Later that morning, Harper unpacked her bag, and this time, she hung her jacket on a hook beside the front door, right next to his. Spring came early that year. The snowmelt trickled down the mountains in silver ribbons. Wildflowers began to bloom between the cracks in the porch steps, and the trees surrounding Cole's cabin swayed with a kind of ease, like they too had survived something and were learning to stand tall again. Inside the house, life settled into a new rhythm. Gracie cried less now. She slept longer. Her cheeks had plumped out, her grip was stronger, and every so often she let out these little squeals of joy that made Daisy laugh out loud. Harper started humming again, not because she needed to calm herself, but because the music simply rose up on its own, like breath. And Cole, he changed in ways too quiet for the outside world to notice. But Harper noticed. He smiled more. His eyes softened when he watched Daisy twirl barefoot across the living room, or when Harper poured coffee into his chipped mug without asking how he liked it. She already knew. One Sunday afternoon, Harper stood at the sink washing dishes, while Cole fixed the garden fence. Gracie was napping in a patch of sunlight near the window, and Daisy sat on the porch steps, singing softly to herself as she tied flowers into a crooked little crown. Harper glanced out the window. Cole had taken off his flannel and was working in a plain white undershirt, his forearms streaked with dirt, the sun catching in his hair. He looked up suddenly, as if sensing her gaze. Their eyes met through the window pane. And even from that distance, Harper felt it. That warmth, that steadiness, that home. She stepped outside with a glass of water, handing it to him silently. He took it, nodding his thanks, but didn't drink. Instead, he reached into the front pocket of his jeans and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Harper raised an eyebrow. He handed it to her. It wasn't a letter. It was a list. "Things I know now. 1. Gracie likes being held more than being rocked. 2. Daisy is terrible at pretending to like broccoli. 3. You laugh in your sleep. 4. I'm not afraid of quiet anymore. 5. I want you to stay. Harper blinked, the words hitting her like sunlight, on skin too long kept in shadow. She folded the paper, pressed it to her chest, and whispered, I already did. Cole smiled. Not wide, not dramatic, just real. Later that evening, as the sky turned gold and lavender, Harper found herself sitting on the front porch rocker, Gracie asleep in her lap. Cole sat beside her, strumming his guitar, the tune soft and familiar. Daisy leaned against Harper's shoulder, her eyes fluttering shut. No one spoke. They didn't have to. The world was full of words, but sometimes the heart spoke loudest in silence. Harper looked over at Cole and reached for his hand. He took it, fingers, threading through hers with an ease that felt like it had always been there. I used to think love had to be loud, Harper whispered. Big gestures, big words, big promises. Cole tilted his head, curious. She smiled. But this is enough. A baby sleeping safely. A guitar. A man who doesn't need to say he loves me for me to feel it. He paused his playing, then gently set the guitar aside and pulled a pen from his back pocket. He scribbled on a torn scrap of paper and handed it to her. I've said it 1,000 times, just not with my mouth. Harper laughed, tears brimming in her eyes. She reached into her own pocket, pulled out the same folded list he'd given her earlier in the garden, and turned it over. She wrote, Things I know now. 1. Silence can be louder than words. 2. Healing doesn't have a deadline. 3. You don't have to run to be strong. 4. Some love stories begin after the storm. 5. I love you too. Cole read it, folded it slowly, and tucked it into the front pocket of his flannel shirt. Then, as the sun dipped low, he leaned over, not rushed, not asking, and pressed a kiss to her forehead. A simple touch. But to Harper, it felt like everything. That night, as the stars returned and the cabin settled into its familiar quiet, Harper crawled into bed beside Gracie and watched the baby breathe. She thought of all the things she used to fear. Loneliness, uncertainty, being seen too clearly. Now she understood none of those things had disappeared. She had just stopped facing them alone. The first time Gracie said, Dada, it wasn't dramatic. No fireworks, no camera rolling, no crowd to witness it. It happened on an ordinary Thursday morning, sunlight filtering through the curtains, the smell of bacon sizzling in the cast iron pan, and Daisy humming off-key as she watered the garden. Harper was standing at the kitchen counter, stirring pancake batter, her hair a mess, and flannel sleeves rolled to her elbows. Cole stood beside her, quietly chopping fruit. Gracie sat in her high chair, fingers sticky with mashed banana. And then, without prompting, without warning, she reached one hand toward Cole and said, clear as morning, Dada. Time stopped. Harper dropped the spoon. Cole's knife froze mid-slice. Even Daisy turned mouth open. Gracie giggled as if she had been waiting for this moment all along. Dada, she said again, louder this time, pointing insistently at Cole with a banana-coated finger. Cole turned to Harper, his eyes wide, not with fear, but with something purer. Wonder. A breathless unspoken. Is it okay? Harper didn't cry. She didn't laugh. She just walked over, placed her hand gently on his chest, and said, yes. Gracie clapped, delighted with her own brilliance, unaware that she had just said the one thing Cole had never heard from a child who wasn't born of him, and the one thing Harper never imagined she'd let another man be. Father. Later that day, Harper took Gracie for a walk down the trail behind the cabin. The path had grown familiar. Now roots she used to trip over stones she once resented for being uneven All felt like part of the landscape of a life she had chosen to stay in. Cole had stayed behind to fix the squeaky screen door. Again. He never seemed to mind doing things twice. She watched Gracie bounce in the carrier strapped to her chest, cheeks pink from the cool breeze. "I think you knew before I did," Harper whispered. "You always looked at him like he was yours." The baby cooed in response, as if to say, "Of course I did." Harper smiled, then looked up at the sky, wide, endless calm. Not long ago she would have looked up and wondered how soon she could leave. Now she only wondered how to make this feeling last. When she returned to the cabin, the screen door no longer squeaked. Instead, there was something new. A hand-carved sign hung beside the doorway, the wood still raw, but smooth. Barrett & Co. Harper laughed softly. And Cole stepped out, wiping sawdust from his hands. He looked sheepish. Then he pointed to Gracie, then to Daisy inside, then to her. "Company," he was saying. She stepped closer. "So, not just guests anymore." He shook his head slowly, and for the first time since she'd known him, his eyes filled with tears. Harper reached into her back pocket, pulled out the folded piece of paper she'd written months ago, her goodbye letter, and without a word tossed it into the fire pit beside them. It caught flame quickly. Disappeared. Gone. "What about vows?" she asked softly. Cole tilted his head, confused. "If people like us ever wanted to get married," Harper said. Blushing, what would that look like? Cole thought for a long moment. Then he went inside. When he returned, he was holding his journal, the one he had once written to his late wife, but now a ribbon marked a fresh page. He handed it to Harper. She opened it. "Vows I never said. Until now, I promise to make you tea when you're too tired to ask. I promise to carry the silence with you when words feel heavy. I promise to protect what we've built, even when storms return. I promise to be your home, not your hiding place. I promise to listen with more than my ears. And if someday you say I do know that I already did." Harper pressed the page to her chest. She didn't need a church, didn't need a dress. She had already walked the longest aisle of her life out of fear, through grief, into something whole again. She nodded, eyes shining. "I do." That night, as dusk settled over the trees and fireflies blinked in the tall grass, the cabin glowed from within. Gracie slept between Harper and Cole on the old couch. Daisy curled up in an armchair, a book resting open on her chest. The guitar sat untouched nearby. No one played. No one spoke. They didn't need to. Because sometimes love doesn't need a voice. It just needs a beginning. And they had one. And sometimes, love doesn't need a voice. It just needs someone willing to stay when everyone else walks away. If this story touched your heart, even just a little, let us know. Share in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to see how far stories like this can reach. And if you'd like to hear more stories about quiet strength, unexpected grace, and the beauty of second chances, feel free to subscribe. No pressure, just a seat waiting for you here anytime. From all of us, thank you truly for spending this time with us today. We're honored to share these stories with you. Until next time, take care of your heart and take care of each other.